Our fly today is only around about 6mm, so our camera is on super zoom to help you with tips and tricks for small flies.
Hi everybody, this is Stuart, your Vice Captain speaking, and thank you for flying with us today. Now, we all understand the importance of tying small flies, but perhaps your hands aren't very steady. Maybe your eyesight isn't quite as good as it used to be. So I'm going to show you some techniques, some very simple techniques, and tie a high visibility gnat to show how you can still tie small flies. You do need the right setup, so first and foremost, it's important to have a rotary vise and to have with it a bobbin rest, because that anchors everything around your fly. You'll notice that my vise has an extra stem. Why? Because it brings the fly closer to my face. And then finally, the elbow. My elbow can rest on the table and I can still manipulate thread and materials whilst having stability. So, with no more ado, let's carry on and tie the high visibility Griffiths Gnat.
When you're tying small flies, it's important to use high quality hooks so that they don't straighten when you strike a monster. Today, we'll be using a Teamco TMC 103BL. Always use barbless hooks for small flies. Now the choice of thread is equally important. Don't use your traditional threads and choose your thread carefully. Newer makes like Vivus often make smaller sizes, and for the smallest flies you'll need cobweb or Dyneema. But size 20 isn't that small, so for this one we'll be using Vivus 12-0 in black. Tie on at the front and go to about the halfway point. Using scissors to cut your thread, don't try and snap it as you'll bend the hook. Small flies are hard to see, so use a visibility post. Here I use Teamco Aero Dry Wing. You can either use fine or split normal in half. And when you tie this on, make sure you keep the post above the hook and not around it to minimize bulk. And also count every single thread wrap. Make sure you use the minimum, here only 2, before I post the thread. And I use my ring finger to pass the thread round. So you really don't need a gallows tool, just a bit of practice. The post height here should equal about the width of the hurl, so that the post will be invisible to the fish looking from below. I always varnish the tops of my visibility posts. It's sacrificial, but it does tame the post when you're making small flies, and it really helps. And now for the hackle itself. If you're a bulk tyer tying 20 dozen of these, you're going to use a midge saddle at between 70 and 100 pounds a time. If you're a frequent flyer, like I am, then midge capes are often the answer, and here's a set by Nature's Spirit. And then finally, for most everyone else, raid your normal capes. Right at the top you'll find a few midge sizes, enough to make a couple of dozen. Pick a size 20 grizzly hackle and cut away the feather fluff, but leave the fibres, as we'll need it because the hook at the bottom is still bare. Notice how I catch the post here, but because of the varnish it snaps back, otherwise I'd be in a lot of trouble. Take your size 20 hackle and neatly wrap to the back of the hook where the barb would be. The next ingredient is peacock herl. Make sure you use best quality, as we'll only be using a single fibre. Pull the fibre away from the eye and then run it between your fingers so that you snap off the brittle end. You don't want this to snap while you're tying, so snap off the weak bits first. Then reverse the herl in your hands and tie it in, point first, at the back of the hook. Quickly tie your herl in and then run the thread up in loose wraps to the front of the hook. You always want to use minimal wraps. So far this is only the second layer on this fly. Instead, I'll use a 2-wrap whip finish just to hold everything together. Small flies need small tools. I use the CNF whip finisher. The Petitjean is also good. This allows you to use the bobbin rest to apply the hurl. Small flies really benefit from the even application that the rotary vise gives you. So wind the hurl forward, dodging the hook point and the post. Use a figure of 8 wrap around the post itself just to make sure that you've covered everything, and then finish winding the hurl forward to the head. You can then remove the bobbin rest. It usually goes back, but because of the video backdrop, I'll move it forward. You then lock off the hurl with 2 or 3 wraps over, and then a couple of under just to lock it off. Remember, you're always minimizing wraps. You can then remove the rest of the hurl. Remember to push, don't cut with your scissors, so that only the waste is removed. It's time for the whip finisher again. Just a couple of wraps to hold everything together and allow me to use the rotary action to wind the hackle. Bring back your bobbin rest and grab your pliers. Small flies need small pliers, and I personally find the CNF best for video work when space is limited. The CNF also have elastic in the middle that helps protect fine materials. Insert the hackle into your pliers and then quickly wind the hackle around the fly, dodging the hook point and post as you go. And remember to keep your elbow on the table as you do this, as it helps stabilize your hand as you apply the hackle. Thanks to Wally, by the way, for sending the Collins cape over from Canada. Remove the bobbin rest and then quickly lock the hackle in place with 2 or 3 wraps, first on top, and then you want to remove your pliers and sweep everything back and lock underneath the hackle before taking your scissors and pushing to remove the tip. The fly is almost finished now, so I've used the first of 2 whip finishes, one just to hold everything together, and then the second I'll use a little bit of varnish just to touch onto the thread. All I want is for the thread to be wet, so I'll then quickly remove any excess, and then I will apply the second and final whip finish. This applies the absolute minimum amount of varnish to the fly and helps small flies float. Then remove your thread again by pushing your scissors, and then grab the post on top and cut away the sacrificial varnish bit. If you cut it slightly over, then you can make sure you get it to the right size when you get on the river. So that's it. Tips and tricks for the high visibility gnat.